I'll tell you something, YouTube ain't getting their greasy mitts on this review for no lousy $15. They'll probably get it for free. Hi guys, and welcome to my brand new Tremors review series. Over the next few months I'm going to be covering all 7 of these movies, starting with this classic original, which could very well turn out to be the best of the bunch. Not that I want to give the game away straight off the bat. I have a long history with this franchise. I saw the first film way back in '91, like a year after it came out. Not that it's a competition and I want to sound all smug and superior about the fact. I don't think it's a franchise that ever quite hit the major leagues in horror. It's more next league down. And I think part of the reason for that is that it's not an easy film to sell to people who've not seen it. I mean, if I gave you a plot synopsis of Tremors, it'd probably go something like this. Well, it's about these giant killer worms that come out from under the ground, grab people, pull them down and kill them. And it's up to this small desert town of 14 people in Nevada who have to somehow kill the worms and save the day. Okay, I didn't make it sound very good, but you get the gist. I think if somebody came to me with that as a plot synopsis and tried to get me to watch it if I hadn't seen it, I think I'd probably politely tell them to do one, really. It sounds like a really bad film off the Sci-Fi Channel or something. I'd probably say, I can't watch your film suggestion tonight. I'm washing my hair. The worms in this, though, are absolutely fantastic. I like the fact that a lot of practical effects were used, at least in this first film. As you get into the sequels, it gets more and more CGI, but I think they paid the art department a lot of money in this original because there are some great practical effects. At one point, you get to see a big, large version of the worm that they've actually made up. They've put parts of the worm's mouth in there. They've got bits of gloop and blood coming out of it from where it hit this stone wall and died, and it just looks absolutely terrific. At another point, you get to see one of the small snakes from its mouth, like wrapped around the back of a car, and it makes you feel like you're watching a real species that's just come into existence. Later on in the film, in the final scene of all, I'm giving spoilers away, but too bad. One of the worms is like detonated by dynamite, and you get to see bits of gloop and bone fly up in the air and land on all the characters. And it's really satisfying that they took the time to design all these pieces and get them up there in the air and have them come down. Compare this to a film I watched just the other night, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. Not a bad film, to be fair, but the final scene, there's this monster that the characters have got to destroy, and this guy shoots it with a rocket launcher that he basically pulls out of his arse because 5 minutes earlier he didn't have it. The monster dies in like a haze of smoke, but you don't get to see the carcass. There's no bits of it flying everywhere, which would happen from a blast from a rocket launcher. And when I was watching this, I was just reminded of Tremors, and I thought, why couldn't they have done what Tremors did? Because this is just not particularly satisfying. You think a film with a budget like the new Resident Evil film, it would have been able to do more than what they did. But Tremors did do that. It put in the effort with the practical side. It wasn't just all CGI and effects. Funnily enough, the very final kill in Tremors, where the worm goes off the cliff, so it sort of goes through the cliff and then drops down. I think they used a miniature for that scene because the effect of it looks like somebody's taken a Cornish pasty, filled it with dirt and gloop, and then started filming, just dropped it off a very small hill onto some small stones, it's splattered, and then basically, yep, cut, it's in the bag, Brenda, clean that up, feed it to the dog, whatever. As good as the worms are, though, they are not the best thing about this film. The true stars are the human characters. Now, on the one hand, yes, this is a film that's quite famous for being the only mainstream horror film about giant killer worms, to my knowledge anyway. But if you took the worms out of it and replaced them with some random serial killer going around this small Arizona town, picking people off, it would have still gone on to be a cult film for me because of how so amazing the characters are. They're led in the main by these 2 guys called Val and Earl, played by Fred Ward and Kevin Bacon. And they are absolutely amazing. The chemistry between the 2 of them is just, it's so sharp. I mean, watching them go back and forth with quips and the way they take the piss out of each other, it's an absolute delight. These 2 are possibly the best partnership I've ever seen in a horror film. In fact, if you separate them and just judge them as individuals, that they're still probably two of the best horror characters I've ever seen. They are so funny, and from the minute you start watching this film, you are just instantly behind them. Their dialogue is just absolutely brilliant. There's this one really ironic moment, at least if you've seen the sequels, where I think it's Earl who says to Val, "Next thing you're going to tell me they can fly." Well, the funny thing is they can fly. Val and Earl just don't know it yet. We find this out in Tremors 3, but this is just one of those accidental little lines that I only noticed the other night for the first time, actually, that somehow factors into the later films, albeit accidentally. There's another really ironic moment. So Val has this crush on a woman called Tammy Lynn Dexter. He's got pictures of her on the mirror of his car. Now, it's not explicitly stated, but I think this is a woman who's like a pin-up model or something, and he's cut these pictures out of a magazine. That's the impression I get anyway. But Earl is really disapproving of fancying women like this, I guess because they're unobtainable, for one, and also, at the end of the day, they might not have great personalities to go with their great bodies. Earl believes that you should try and go for more down-to-earth women, real women, I guess he'd call them. But the ironic thing is that even though Earl is really passionate about this, when he's telling Val, when he's, giving him the wisdom of his knowledge, in the sequel, which Fred Ward comes back for and Kevin Bacon doesn't, Earl ends up going out with one of these types of women, ironically, albeit she's retired. Again, it's just one of those weird little things that sort of plays into the later films in a minute way. It's not just Val and Earl who are great characters, the whole supporting cast. There's just so many great people in this town that you instantly start to like. They have really great personalities, such as Rhonda, played by Finn Carter, who bizarrely did not go on to have any kind of acting career after this. I think she did like 3 more films, but not very famous films. Could she not have come back to the Tremors sequels once it was clear that an A-list career was going to be out of the question? I've no idea. There's also Melvin, who's like this little dipshit teen who just pisses everybody off all the time because he's constantly playing practical jokes, and sometimes people get back at him. But if you can call this a subplot, I absolutely love following the antics of Melvin throughout this film. At one point, he tries to shoot one of the worms with like this 6-shooter he's got his hands on, but the worms are like 200 yards away, and he's just shooting at them even though they're sort of under the ground. I'm like, this is the reason why nobody wants to give you bullets. Melvin comes out with this one line. It's, "Way to go, dude." It's just after they've killed one of the worms for the first time, I think, and they're all celebrating the characters. But this line, it's such an odd way to say it, and I swear to God this is a true story. So I was in high school way back in probably the mid to late 90s, and I was in a business studies class, I think, and this kid, who was like a couple of seats away from me, never really had much to do with him during school, to be honest, but he suddenly said this same line from Tremors. He suddenly said to his mate, "Way to go, dude." And I piped up and I said, "Is that from Tremors?" And the guy just looked at me and went, "Yeah." And I presume that it had just been on TV the night before or something. But it's such a weird thing because I don't remember having anything to do with this kid throughout the whole of high school, but somehow we bonded over a random line from Tremors. And then we come to Burt Gummer, played by Michael Gross, the one guy who would go on to be the mainstay throughout all these films, though in this original he's just a side character. I guess he's like a prepper. He's a gun enthusiast. He thinks that eventually there'll be a World War III that requires his aid, or some kind of American Civil War or something. He's ready to go. He's someone who will come up with conspiracy theories all the time. A very likeable character, and also a very believable one. My dad really liked Burt Gummer, and the reason I mention that is because my dad usually didn't like horror films. We bonded over action films and thrillers, usually, never horror, apart from Tremors. And that's how good this film is. It can even get the interest of non-horror fans, and I think partly that's because of the comedy, but in my dad's case it was also because of Burt Gummer. I think my dad could see some of Burt in him, because my dad sort of liked guns. He was in the British Army. We didn't have any guns in the house because they're illegal in the UK, but I suspect had we lived in America, my dad probably would have had a gun cabinet of some sort, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. There's a scene in this film involving Bert, and I swear it's one of my favourite scenes in any film I have ever seen. It's absolutely amazing. So we eventually arrive at a point in the story where the worms turn their attentions to Bert and Heather's house. And when this happens, instantly you think, okay, these characters are going to die now, because up until this point, they've only really been side characters who've sort of dipped in and out of the story. They even start behaving like characters who are about to die. So Val comes through on the radio, Bert, they're under the ground, they're under the ground. And he stood there with his gun looking out the window going, I still can't see them. And I'm thinking, oh, you are so dead, mate. I mean, you might as well start chiseling your gravestone right now. And then right on cue, a worm bursts through the wall of the cellar or their rec room or whatever they call it. And Bert and Heather start shooting at it. And I'm thinking to myself, the first time I watched this, yeah, okay, have a go at shooting it, but you are so dead. Let's just get that straight. But then some amazing things started to happen. So Bert gets grabbed by one of the tongues, and Heather just grabs this shotgun and starts blasting away at this tongue, and it works. She frees Bert, and I'm like, yes, go on, girl. And then the next thing that happens, and I think I've got the order right in this, Bert and Heather realise they need more guns, more ammo, so they just back towards this wall that's just covered in all the guns you've ever seen in your life. It's amazing. We've not seen it up until this point of the story. I think that was a good decision to just reveal that right in the thick of the action. But this wall of guns is just astonishing. It's the sort of thing that like Arnold Schwarzenegger would use to tool up to go and fight Dan Hedaya and Vernon Wells. Every gun under the sun is on this wall, and Bert and Heather start pulling them off and shooting every single one of them, seemingly. And as this scene is progressing, I'm thinking they might just stand a chance here if they can keep going. And then Bert's got another ace up his sleeve. He's got this glass case with an even more powerful gun. It's like a rifle that's like longer than a golf club, and that's the clincher. That's what finally kills the worm. When that worm dies in this scene, the first time I watched this, I was like, I was literally jumping off my seat. I just could not believe that these two took out this thing. The film just completely flips your expectations in that moment. It's absolutely astonishing. And then there's even one great moment still to come. So Val and Earl, while all this is going on, they're on the roof of this convenience store looking really down in the dumps, because even they know that Bert and Heather were meant to die in this scene. But then Bert suddenly comes through on the radio. We got that mother humper. We got him. And there's celebrations afoot. And Val gets back on the radio. That's great, but be advised, there are two more mother humpers. One more thing I love about this film. Oh, there's not going to be any negatives today, by the way. If you're waiting for those, I'm sorry, you're completely out of luck. I just don't have any for Tremors. So, okay, we've got that one scene where Bert and Heather blast their way out of Dodge, but that's not the whole movie. If it had been, it would have basically been Starship Troopers in Nevada, and it wouldn't have been as good. For the most part in this, characters have to use their resourcefulness and their creative thinking to escape the worms, and I love that about this. The characters have to be intelligent. They have to work together to come up with solutions for every predicament. So this film is sort of set up like a puzzle. You find out what the worms are about and what they can do, and then you've got to figure out how the characters could escape that threat in this environment. They've got to use anything at their disposal, buildings both big and small, whatever vehicles are lying around, what items, and it's just a really smart movie in that regard. And all the time that the characters are coming up with new solutions, you're instantly evaluating those ideas to see if they could possibly work and what the cons might be. The final scene where some of the characters end up marooned on a set of rocks, you can pause the movie at that point and see if you can come up with the solution that the actual characters will eventually come up with. So I love that about this film, that the characters are having to constantly be smart, be intelligent all the way through, and they're not just using a massive arsenal of weapons. Right, I will quickly show you the version of the film that I've got for this. Actually, I'll show you the version that I used to use for this. I used to have, I've still got this triple pack with Tremors 1, 2 and 3. Now, when I bought this and I watched the movies, I don't remember having a problem with the picture quality, but I think my tastes have sort of changed over time. I've gotten used to 4K and HD and Blu-rays and stuff. So when I tried to watch the original film on this earlier this year, I was shocked at just how horrible the picture was and how blurry it was. And I think it was shrunk a little bit on my large TV. And I thought, I can't go on like this. I can't watch this film on this version anymore. So I went out and bought a 4K. Cost me about £20. I think there's a better version than this. You can get one that's like £35 and comes with like posters and postcards and bits and bobs, but this was the right version for me. I buy too many films to want to buy the £35 version of anything. This is still extravagant for me. Absolutely packed with features. It's got 2 audio commentaries. One of them I've got halfway through, and there's loads of documentaries and things. But the important thing is the picture is absolutely fantastic on this. I never got the Blu-ray version, if there was one, which would be the middle ground between the DVD and this. Interesting thing about the 4K, the foregrounds are probably not that much different from whatever the Blu-ray looked like. Still quite crisp and stuff, but it's mainly the backgrounds that are really amazing. Like, if you're a stickler for good scenery in movies, then you'll really be impressed with this version, because there are times when the characters are just talking in the foreground, but if you look to the background, it's so razor sharp. Like, I was watching this version for the first time the other night, and I was seeing the mountains and the surroundings for the first time and being so impressed by it. It's really, really cool. Right, let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this amazing movie. I've sort of given the game away sort of already, haven't I? So we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that it? No. We got a full house. 5 bloody axes out of 5. This doesn't happen very often on the channel, but when it does, hallelujah, it's a moment to celebrate. Tremors, for me, is a masterpiece. It is a 5 out of 5 movie. And as we bring this video to a close, you know what I would love to do if it wasn't for the whole copyright YouTube thing? I would love to play that song that's actually at the end of Tremors, that country song that Reba McEntire sings. Because Reba McEntire not only stars in this film as Heather, she's also a singer mainly for a job, and she contributes the song that finishes this movie off. I'm not usually into country music, but I really love that song. If I'm watching the movie, I'll always watch the song right to the very end. What really would have tickled me would have been if the Heather character had actually died, gotten chewed up in the worm, and then still come back to sing that really cheerful country song. But that doesn't happen. She survives the movie. Right, I'll be back soon to do Tremors 2. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.